Welcome back and thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. This is going to be part 2 of the dust extractor build. In part 1, we built a big frame that everything is going to go inside, as well as the dust cyclone, which is going to separate the dust particles from the clean air. In today's episode, we're going to finish up all the parts that go inside the frame and then cover it all up and then somehow get this massive piece of machinery out the door and installed in the parking lot outside. All right, no more time to waste. Thank you so much for joining me in today's episode. Let's get started. So the frame behind me is basically done. Most of the structure is in place. The next step will be to start mounting the components inside of the frame. And the first thing we're gonna mount is the motor. But before we can start mounting anything, first we need to cut down this piece. The only thing that we really need from this big entire section is the motor, the fan, and the housing that it sits in. So I've marked up the line right here, and I'm gonna take the angle grinder and cut this off. And then we can start mounting it. Okay, so that was a lot of grinding, but luckily we're done. The motor is separate, and we've also got 2 of these rings. They're going to be super useful to hang a bag on here because they've got these little lips so that the bag doesn't slide down when it's strapped on there. This one is going to go directly onto the filter, and the way I'm going to attach it is I'm going to use some of this really strong glue and maybe a couple of screws. Okay, next thing we're gonna tackle is this piece right here. This is gonna be responsible for getting the dust and air from the top of the cyclone and duct it into the top of the filter. And I just directly drew them onto the sheets of wood and then cut them out. So the air is gonna go in here, into the box, and out again there. To get the space difference that we need right here, I've cut a couple of spacer pieces, and they are pretty simply just gonna go in like so. And then once this is glued and nailed together, I've cut a couple of strips of birch plywood. This is 4 mil thick, and it's cut across the grain. The reason why I did that is that now it's nice and flexible. So hopefully this should be flexible enough to wrap around the edges here. We'll glue that in place, nail it in with a couple of the brad nails, and then we've got our very compact ducting. Pretty simply, just like that, we've got this part done. On to the next one. Alright, so this is the opposite side of the filter that we glued on that ring on just now. On this side we've cut a hole to match the standard air ventilation pipe. And I've just taken one of these fittings right here and cut it in half so that now one of these halves will fit there, and then we'll have just a plywood ring go on top of it to have one of these pipes be able to connect really easily. Alright, we'll just screw glue all this in place and then we should be ready to mount this once the glue dries. So we're finally at the point where we can start mounting stuff into the frame, and I've actually gone ahead and started with that. I've already mounted the motor and this ring that will connect to the trash bag where all the sawdust will fall into. The locations for these two are based right out of the model, and I've also made a couple of additional parts. We've got this board right here that helps locate the dust cyclone and will also be a part of the sound insulation later on. And I've made this board right here, which will act as the base for the pipe that we made, and will feed all the dust and air up through the fan and up into the cyclone. Now that we have those two boards in place that will help us locate different parts that we made in the frame, the next step now will be to install this pipe that we made. I've already glued and screwed these two boards to that pipe. So the next step is just to fit everything together. And we'll screw these two wood pieces together so that we can install this entire thing as one piece. That really was a challenge. I barely managed to fit it in, but it is in, and that is the most important part right now. Before we can start attaching anything permanently, we need to figure out that all the components are in their right position. So what I'm gonna do right now is to use the dust cyclone as the reference and base all the parts off of that one. The first step will be to level and straighten it and then secure it into place. And after that, we can start to figure out the position of the filter, and the position of the filter is then gonna dictate the angle of which this piece is going to sit. Once we got all of that figured out, we can start attaching stuff permanently. So this is how the frame looks right now. I've taken most of the parts out of it again, meaning that the only thing that's still in the frame is the motor itself. I chose to take these parts out because I've been thinking about this for a while now. And the most important thing, the reason why we're building this box as sturdy and big and thick as it is because we want to sound insulate it as much as possible. And not only that, we also want to do that in as small of a space as possible. So what that means is that everything is crammed in here really tightly and compact, and there's no real space left over for installing all of this. I do have to be kind of careful in what order I assemble all these parts in. So the first thing I'm going to do is start with mounting the bottom and try to box in this area here as much as possible. Then we're going to continue on in attaching and insulating all of these parts, on top of which we're going to mount the cyclone and the dust filter. After that, we're going to start building the walls. So the entire structure here is going to have all the inside walls covered with plasterboard, then a layer of insulation, and then a layer of OSB board on the outside. And the goal is to have as many layers of plasterboard and insulation and whatever we can fit in there that dampens the sound in between the motor, which is the part that generates all the noise, and the outside. So we're gonna start there and then see how far we get until we run into any problems with any of the parts not wanting to fit together. We are finally getting somewhere with the sound insulation of the main noise generating part. There's at least 2 layers of plasterboard everywhere around here now. And the next step is going to be to install this board, which will not only serve as a base to mount the ducting going from the fan up into the cyclone, but also as another layer of sound insulation. And then there's only one more component left after that of the parts that we made earlier that will complete the ducting system for this dust extractor. After that, all there's really left to do is to insulate this entire box as well as we possibly can. But before we get to insulating anything, we need to figure out how to mount this. Okay, so we are really getting somewhere with this build. For the most part, all there's left is a lot of insulation. But before we start closing everything off and making everything basically airtight, we still need to do one more thing. So the motor here will get hot when it's running, and having it inside of an enclosed space where there's no air circulation will eventually cause it to burn out. So what we're gonna do is that we're gonna take some ducting components and run a pipe from all the way on the top of the box right here, down and through, and then run some ducting close to the back side of the motor here, where there's a fan that will suck in the air. So we'll have one of these pipes that sucks in air from the outside, and another one right here that will blow it up into the room right here. So we've made up this box right here, and it will act as a sound absorbing box for the air inlet for the motor. Instead of having just a straight pipe go from inside of the compartment where the motor sits and out to basically fresh air, this will keep the sound from moving from the motor to the outside. And the way it does that is that the air will have to travel inside of this compartment right here, where all the surfaces are lined with this insulation material. And once we put the lid on, air can still freely flow through here, but hopefully a lot of the sound will be dampened. So we'll glue this up and then we'll install it. So now at the back of this box, I have spent some time beating this metal cone into submission, forming what will be the air intake for our dust collector. So air will go in here, go through the system, and then the second pipe here is so that we can take the air that has gone through the system and comes out of here clean and blow it back into the workshop. This is because we live in Norway and it gets really cold here in the winter. So sucking out all the warm air and just blowing it out the window would be kind of counterproductive. And the next step now is to just fill this entire box with insulation and insulate it as well as we can with plasterboards on either side of the box. Close off all the walls here, and then we'll do basically the same thing on the other side. Okay, so with some really good help from Simon and Lucien the other day, most of the box is finally sealed up. I've just spent a couple hours building a door. It's quite simple, it's just 2 layers of OSB with some insulation between. And it is quite simply attached with just a couple of hinges mounted on the outside. The next step now is that I've cut a notch into this 2x4 and I'm gonna screw this to the door like this so that I'll end up flush with the outside surface. And to this piece, we're gonna attach a couple of these locking hinges, which will allow us to drag the door shut and create a good and tight seal. We're also gonna put some of this insulating rubber on the inside of the door so that when we clamp this door shut, we're hopefully gonna create an air and soundproof seal. That just about finishes up everything we can do to this box while it is still in my workshop. The next challenge is going to be to move it outside. There's only one small problem, and that is, look at the size of this thing. Look at the size of that door. It's not going to fit. So the door that we spent so much time just a couple of episodes ago installing is got to go. It's okay though, because I've got a new and bigger door right here that is more sound insulated. So before the other guys arrive, I'll start ripping out the door and then we'll try to move it outside. Wish us luck. Man, I've got to tell you, I am so happy that this thing finally is outside and installed in a parking lot. I am so relieved that it actually fits. It's always so nerve-wracking when you build something massive based on measurements, and even though you know you've measured a million times, there's always a slight possibility of something going wrong and then the thing not fitting. And when we're talking about like a 600 kilogram piece of machinery, I'm very happy nothing went wrong. It fits like a glove, if I can say so myself. It fits in the opening here perfectly, and behind that window is our workshop. To get it out here, we had to flip it out on its side and then roll it out of the workshop with only millimeters to spare out through the big steel door. We then got some paint on it and then somehow rolled it all the way around the building and then flipped it out on its side and installed it right here. Since then, we've put the last coat of paint on it. We've installed nice corner trim pieces and these protective corners. We've also installed latches to keep the door closed. But now to the big question, does it work and how well does it work? And also, how noisy is it? Well, regarding the noise, let me tell you, it's been running the whole time I've been talking to you. So I'm gonna count that as a success. So this is with the door open and the machine running. You can see that both bags are now filled up. Right now all the air is being pushed out through the door opening here, but when we close it, all the air is going back into our workshops. So this is the bag that is underneath the dust cyclone, and you can see that all the dust is spinning in the direction that the cyclone is circulating it in. So all the particles end up in the bottom here, and then the clean air goes up through the filter and ends up here. And you can see that this bag is basically empty, which it should be. So this works great. Let me show you what it looks like on the inside. Okay, so inside here, this is what it sounds like. It really is not bad. Very happy with the noise level in here. Let me plug it out though. Let me show you how it looks inside. So you might recognize these two ports. They're now sticking in through what used to be a window, and the suction is going here and the return air comes in through this hole right up here. Everything here is kind of just temporarily fixed in place with duct tape, basically. We mainly just wanted to hook up the dust collection to the table saw to test its performance, and it really seems to work pretty well so far. I've done a bunch of cutting of MDF for a new project that is going to come out soon, and so far, well, all the dust in the bag up there was from that project, and down here really not a lot of dust, so I'm very happy. You'll probably see the finished piping solution in an upcoming video. I don't think I'm gonna make a separate video on that. But until next time, thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and I'll catch you next time. Bye. Got you. You didn't think I was gonna leave you without showing you how well it works. Here, let me show you.